Final score from the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl, the Memphis Tigers 42, our beloved West Virginia Mountaineers 37. Memphis improves to 11-2 on the season. West Virginia unfortunately drops to 6-7 for the 2024 campaign. I'm Carson Fox for Fox on West Virginia Sports, and this is the recap show signing off on the entire 2024 season. This loss dropped West Virginia's all-time bowl record to 17-24. This is also, and I found this stat pretty dramatic and really kind of sums up everything from this entire season and how absolutely disappointing it was that West Virginia suffered its first ever bowl loss to an opponent outside the Power Four. Or previously, if you want to call it Power Five, yes. That was the kind of loss that this was. Quick recap of the game for those who might have fallen asleep. I was one that had to watch this game in segments because, when the game was 35-17 beginning the third quarter, the sleep-deprived new dad that I am said, my sleep is way too valuable to watch this debacle any bit longer. Quick recap of the game for you for those who didn't tune into it or are still trying to seen maybe the box score, look through the play-by-play, but haven't necessarily watched it. So West Virginia did trail 17-0 out of the gate over the game's first 20 minutes of play before rallying with 7 consecutive scoring drives, 6 of those by way of touchdowns to cut the score to 42-37. Memphis's place kicker, Tristan Vandenberg, missed a 50-yard field goal try, giving West Virginia the ball with no timeouts and 45 seconds to play from the WVU 31-yard line. But on 3rd and 1 at the Memphis 37, 23 seconds still on the game clock, senior quarterback Garrett Green threw an interception in double coverage intended for Rodney Gallagher. Gallagher appeared to have punched the ball out of intercepting linebacker Elijah Herring's arm as he was sliding down to the ground. Why this was important was West Virginia recovered the fumble and would have given the Mountaineers a first down with 8 seconds left to play from inside the Memphis 35, but the ruling on the field was overturned and Memphis kneeled the ball in victory formation. That is kind of a high level view of the game. I'm going to get into the analysis from this contest, as you can just hear it first and foremost, first from me. But West Virginia really did offensively turn into a second gear, it seemed like, from the second quarter, third quarter, and all the way till the very end. So while the defense was putrid, at least we got some offense in this contest. And that's where I really want to start with the analysis of this game for this video. West Virginia's pass defense was once again absolutely awful. Awful. Giving up 294 yards through the air on just 18 completions for Memphis quarterback Seth Hennigan. Perhaps the most egregious play coming when the game was 35-30, 12:02 left in the fourth quarter, with Memphis starting the drive out on its own 10-yard line. West Virginia, at this point in the contest, had gone on an offensive streak, cutting the game to 35-30. So many guys on the offense really contributing at this point in time. You just needed one stand, and I know they ended up getting it on the next series to force the field goal, as I had mentioned, like getting with no timeouts, getting Memphis off the field, or wasting their 2 timeouts plus having the 2-minute timeout. Got Memphis on the field with time to play. But just at that point in time, this is deep into the fourth quarter at this point in time, on the very first play after Memphis kills itself with I think it was a holding call or an elite block in the back or something to pull Memphis all the way back to its 10-yard line. This fake bubble screen, run and shoot, wheel route down the field. Demir Blankensee takes advantage of an Anthony Wilson miscommunication or misassignment. catches the pass, has enough speed to take it 89 yards down the field. Thankfully, Jaheim Joseph was able, I thought, take a bad angle and still running full speed, but just not good enough of an athlete in Jaheim Joseph to catch Blankensee earlier in the run, but thankfully swats at his foot at the very end. He trips and falls down to the 1 yard line. Memphis scores on the very next play. So it's just like, once again, by one of the historically bad, I feel like, West Virginia defenses, in program history, or at least of my lifetime in this year's defense, can't come up. Can't come up with a stop when you needed it at that point in time. I think Blankensee and fellow wide receiver Rock Taylor, who I talked about in the pregame show, absolutely clowned West Virginia's defensive backs, Garnet Hollis Jr., Jaheim Joseph, and Dantes Fagan on this day. Just more evidence, in my opinion, that when defensive coordinator Jordan Leslie was fired after the Arizona game, co-defensive coordinator and defensive backs coach Shadon Brown should have went with him, and Neil Brown should have turned the reins over to assistant Javon Codlin. I just feel like while a lot of blame can be thrown around for this loss, and just in my quick recap, you might be thinking you must be mistaking for I'm putting it all on Garrett Green because of that last play interception. I'm not. This secondary was absolute trash. Terrible. And I know, and we talked about in the pregame show, that the depth was depleted. No Aiden Garnes for most of this season. Now he's hit the transfer portal today. Thank God. TJ Crandall not playing. I know we've been missing Aubrey Burks in that back end for a long time on this season. You were down bodies, and you were down good bodies. And this is what you had to go with. But it just, watching the way Taylor was just out physicaling Garnet Hollis Jr. on this day, it just made me ill. Just made me so thankful that this season is over, that I never have to watch those guys play in pass coverage ever again in the old gold and blue, because this was an absolutely painful season. Painful. And the touchdown that they gave up right before the halftime, Green comes away with this awesome run to get West Virginia back, in business. And on the very next series, they gave up this easy touchdown, a little flag pattern. Jaheim Joseph is the only guy standing right here, and he crossed over, and I think it was Blankensee at that point in time, for an easy touchdown, just making West Virginia look ridiculous on this day. Blankensee, 4 catches, 120 yards and a touchdown. Taylor, 5 catches, 116 yards. On the day. Both had, Blankensee had the long of 89. Taylor had a long of 48. Greg DeRosier, ate him up. I'll talk about him in a little bit, but just this secondary, man. And I know the linebackers really didn't help out much in pass coverage. Just that's their weak spot as part of this 3-3-5 defense is pass coverage. But just that's where I'll start and end. Is this the secondary really, really, really let West Virginia down? I think the bright spot, on a brighter note, now 8 minutes in, it just sounds like it's the end of the world for me. The bright spot for West Virginia in this game was redshirt sophomore wide receiver Hudson Clement. A career high 11 catches for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, it was a bit of a head shaker. I mean, just one you just jaw drops and you can't believe it, when that beautifully thrown 50-plus yard pass by Garrett Green with 8 minutes left to play in the fourth quarter would have given West Virginia some additional time potentially there to play with. But West Virginia ends up scoring on this drive. But some of the catches that he made in this contest, he was shredding cornerbacks Kobe Minor and Davion Ross. How many times? I think of at least 4 or 5 of his catches, he was doing the old Terrence Williams from Baylor against Pat Miller of West Virginia. Just, if your first 3 to 4 steps are going to be back, you're going to play 6 to 7 yards off the ball. I'm going to run around, I'm going to turn, the ball's going to be right there, and I'm going to fall forward, and I'm going to get a first down. So how many times did it seem like Hudson Clement not only did that, but just made highly contested balls? or highly contested catches. I think this was another case point example that he looks more and more like David Sills 2.0 and is going to be a focal point for this offense next season. I mean, the 37-yard reception that he had on the first play of the fourth quarter on 3rd and 9 was huge. And it just made me wonder, as a West Virginia fan, where was more of this successful downfield passing attack this season? Not just to Clement, but to other guys who I feel like can do this. I know where it was. It was because of Neil Brown conservative play calling. That's why. Just so afraid, for whatever reason, to let Garrett Green rip it and throw downfield, to let pass, set up the run, and that's how West Virginia was able to score 37 points on this night. It was they let Garrett Green let it fly. And some was good and some was bad. I'll talk about that. But, Hudson Clement was easily his favorite target on this night. Even drew a personal or I think it was a holding call in the end zone. Ball, I don't think it was kind of it would have been a tough catch, but ended up drawing that call on the night. So Clement, best game of his Mountaineer career against a better opponent than what he did a year ago against Duquesne. So way to end 2024. Obviously, wide receiver 1, depending upon what happens with transfer portal recruiting. But Hudson Clement, man, showed out in the old gold and blue. Loved what I saw out of him last night. Also, I want to say about Chad Scott as offensive coordinator and interim head coach. Pretty solid, what I considered perhaps may have been an audition for him as part of next year's West Virginia staff, with just a bit more good than bad. Although I thought the first 2 offensive series were incredibly boring and predictable. Run, pass, punt, punt. And you can't do that. And with C.J. Donaldson's fumble, that surely didn't help when West Virginia was starting to pick things up offensively on the 3rd series. And that's when Memphis made it a 10-0 game. And then once again, West Virginia drives. It was perhaps maybe the most awkward moment of the night. And this was just about when I felt like I was going to turn the game off for the first time. New head coach Rich Rodriguez was in the announcer's booth being interviewed when West Virginia had it 4th and 1 at its own 46. Rod calls for a tush-push play up the middle, and instead Garrett Green throws a low percentage fade route up to Cole Taylor in coverage, incomplete, turnover on downs, and then on the very next play for Memphis, Greg DeRosier takes off practically uncontested for a 46-yard touchdown. You can't have that. You can't spot the opponent 17 points. And I think that played a major factor in how much of a comeback that was needed by the offense to make this a competitive game. But the defense doesn't do you any help at that point in time. So just understanding, and that's why, like I was talking in the preview show, prediction kind of was Memphis scoring 38 points. I know they just scored 42, but to spot them 17 out at the gate, 17-0, like that hurts. That really hurts. And that's inexperience of a play call or true offensive coordinator in knowing that you can't start that slow. I think Chad Scott unfortunately took a page out of Neil Brown's play calling, handbook, and saying you got to be like, I forget the coach from Waterboy, kind of scared and intimidated. And I don't know if he was just intimidated by the moment, intimidated by being in the place that he was, being able to call that and wanting to just go, this isn't going to fail. At least we're going to accrue yards. It might just be 1 or 2 yards, but at least we're going to get something positive. But just, what was it, 28 total yards in the first quarter? Like that's just not going to cut it, man. That's not going to cut it against Albany, let alone Memphis. So he finally, I think, opened it up, let Garrett Green rip. I think when Green had, he really opened it up, let Garrett Green cook, passing for 328 yards on the night, and he leaned on C.J. Donaldson in the run game. 22 carries, 83 yards, and 2 touchdowns. His last one being one of the best rushes of C.J. Donaldson's WVU career. The second effort that he had in like escaping a tackler who was holding on to his foot while taking contact by multiple defenders en route to that 1 yard, 2 yard touchdown rush. That was awesome. That was beast mode activated by C.J. Donaldson, and that's what he can do for you. Although I just thought the inside zone handoffs, which are the easiest plays in the world to defend for a defense, were monotonous, and they were yards per carry crushing for Donaldson. So you look at that, 22 carries, 83 yards. I just think some points in time in this contest that Chad Scott thought, I don't know exactly what to do. I know that's the bread and butter of the Neil Brown playbook. The foundation of his offense is inside zone run. But with no Wyatt Milam on the field also in this contest, it just made for really tight running lanes. And we talked about it. Memphis came into this contest 10th in the country in rush defense. So would have liked to see a little bit more creative. I know you didn't have Jaheim White, so you were kind of limited on how much you could run horizontally. I forget at what point in time he exited this contest. It sounds like it was just a pull, not a tear or anything serious. But he exited the contest. It must have been before halftime, because I was still watching the game at that point in time live. But I would have also, something against Chad Scott just being a little critiquing here. I would have liked to see West Virginia go for 2 when it cut the Memphis lead to 35-23 there midway through the third quarter. Instead, I don't know why Michael Hayes was doing the holding duty. I don't know if they were just let's give Leighton Bechtel, I think it was at that point in time, a chance to try and, kick an extra point. But if you go for 2 there, you cut the lead to 10. And the way that the game ended up going, if West Virginia would have got that 2-point conversion, we're talking about a 42-39 game. So Garrett Green wouldn't have had to score a touchdown to win the contest. They could have just gotten field goal position, tried to kick a field goal, send the game to overtime. So little things like that. I think that's like a Neil Brown 2019 to 2022 error that unfortunately comes here in this situation to plague Chad Scott. I don't know what happened there, why the switcheroo between Hayes and I think it was Leighton Bechtel attempting it. The snap wasn't great, but it wasn't like he couldn't have still caught the snap, put the hold down and kick it. But just you notice on West Virginia's next score, they went back to Hayes kicking the extra point. So just would have liked it there when West Virginia was starting to really pick up momentum offensively, them go for 2 in that situation to cut that lead to 10. I also would have liked to see Nico Marchiol involved in this game because, he is, I know we have to still talk about the transfer portal and no one is set in stone past today. But if he is quarterback 1 of 2025, would have liked him to get this experience to show what he could do in front of Rich Rodriguez. And prove it on this night. But when Green had that 56-yard rushing touchdown before the half and then drove the offense down for Hayes to cut the lead to 28-17 with that 46-yard field goal, you knew Scott was going to stick with him in hopes of winning this game. But at the end of the day, knowing what the result of this game was, a loss is a loss is a loss. Like, what did that do? Just beyond give Garrett Green that one last opportunity, would it have been better experience for Nico Marchiol to get? So let's talk about Garrett Green. I thought this game was emblematic of what a curious case Garrett Green was during his time at West Virginia. So much good that made you say, wow. From the 56-yard touchdown rush to some of the hookups that he had with Clement. And he even had some really other nice passes on the day. He even had a pass completion to Jarrell Williams, of all freaking people. Like Rodney Gallagher looked like a traditional wide receiver in this contest, not just using him on jet sweeps laterally or, some kind of like trick gadget plays or something, like actually throwing him the ball in wide receiver run routes. Like Green had some throws on this day that were just, poorly placed. Could have been better, but still went for completions. But if they were placed in a bit better of a situation, could have went for extra yards or completions. But I thought the really blah start to the game, to the final interception that just makes you, hold a shrug, WTF. Like, there's just so many times I feel like, thinking back on it now, let's just go to 2022 because 2021 and 2020 inconsequential, but just go to whenever he kind of took over for JT Daniels, then through 2023 and now to today. He would either play hero ball and his supporting cast, namely West Virginia's defense, would let him down, or he would do just one or two things that would, make you point to that made you go, man, Garrett Green, he sure is entertaining. He played his tail off. He's a fighter. He's a hard worker. If you want the kind of character you want in a Mountaineer player, that's the kind of guy you want. But he didn't do X. He didn't do Y. Or, he did do these things that were negative. So, and that's, at the end of the day, we're still talking about a West Virginia loss, and he's the quarterback. And whether justifiably or unjustifiably, in this case, to me, because I put major part of the blame on this game, over 50% on West Virginia's poorest defense, namely the secondary. ESPN gave him a 90 QBR for this game. 100 is perfect. So he got a 90. Do I think he was a 90 grade? I don't know. Again, because of the way things started, and then that interception that I watched the replay of it, and he has C.J. Donaldson right in front of him for 5 yards. Meanwhile, all the guys in the secondary, I think at least 6 to 7 defenders or more, are dropped back deep in coverage, covering the wide receivers. I know there's time ticking off the clock, but if he hits C.J. Donaldson, who has one man to beat with tons of green grass in front of him, I feel like he definitely gets within the red zone, and you have at least enough time for one or two more cracks at the end zone. And like we saw, with the way like Oklahoma State ended in 2018 with Will Grier and David Sills, like that was what was kind of flashing through in my mind there, is like, okay, West Virginia can just drive right down the field here. They have enough time. Like, they have an experienced quarterback. And no, he throws in double coverage to Rodney Gallagher, and that's it. That's how you end the game. So anticlimactic, just so disappointing. Given, again, he had 328 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and 7 carries for 95 yards and a touchdown. So over 400 yards of total offense and 3 touchdowns all came through GG6. But, that's what you're going to remember from this game, is that interception there at the very end, because they did not win the game. So it's sad, and that shouldn't have been the case as many times as it was in Garrett Green's career. That's unfortunately the song we're singing. Winless in the backyard brawl. The way that the Houston game ended with that Hail Mary, that he should have had that game-winning touchdown completion to Hudson Clement, to this, to 0-2 at Penn State, and he played his tail off in both those contests, to suffering, the injuries in the K-State game this season or in the Pitt game last season that cost him. It's just I feel like there could have been more to Garrett Green's career. I think this is almost the tragedy of Jarrett Brown. he was stuck in a Neil Brown, a la Jarrett Brown to Jeff Mullen offense that held back his abilities and what he could do. This year, more so even than last year, West Virginia had a pretty porous defense, so it was like the Geno Smith 2012 effect. If Garrett Green had it in his mind pretty much every time that he stepped out onto the field that he was going to have to score a touchdown for his team, or, they were going to fall behind and like insurmountable leads that would have to come back. So he had that added pressure. The same thing that killed JT Daniels in his career, and at times Jarrett Deggy. So just the complementary football that he had a little bit more so last year, but didn't have at all this year with a competent defense. And then just I think some things just didn't work out. Like he would be inconsistent throwing some days, especially on his deep balls that were like what made him such a hot commodity this offseason of how successful he was last year. I can't think to myself that Devin Carter was so impactful for West Virginia's offense last year that he made that much of a difference in Garrett Green's production from one year to the next. But I don't know, much more film on Garrett Green, what he did well, what he doesn't do well. Other teams kind of schemed for him this year. I think it was all of that. Tougher opponents, all of that wrapped up in a ball. And unfortunately, this is the way it ends. With that Texas Tech game in the regular season, and now this game. Thankfully, he had a senior day against UCF that he won. So, what I want to say kind of to conclude this video, I do want to take the time now, 26 minutes in, to acknowledge that West Virginia never quit in this contest and fought to the very end, which was something many others and I were very curious of. Like if you listen to some other YouTube content creators, podcasters, West Virginia media, going into this game, playing in a lower tier Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern kickoff without a head coach, the transfer portal open. You didn't know what kind of effort that West Virginia was going to give. But this is exactly, I feel like, what riles me up so much about this game. And no disrespect to Memphis, not trying to just degrade them as a program, but West Virginia cannot descend below the Memphises of the world in today's day and age of college football. It's the same feeling that I had when I was leaving the backyard brawl at Acrisure Stadium in September. I don't like Pitt, never will like Pitt, absolutely not. But the same thing happened to me as it did in 2022. And so many people want to come around to me. It was such a good game. It was so entertaining, all this, yada, yada, yada. I don't care. This is not, Pee-wee League football or, youth sports. This is Division I, Power 4 football. And I think that is unfortunately the sickness, the illness of mediocrity that infiltrated the West Virginia program because of Neil Brown. I feel like so many from the West Virginia administration to so many West Virginia fans were hypnotized, truly, under a spell by Neil Brown over these last 6 years. That he was such a good guy and a family man and wanting to welcome alumni back into the program. Everybody said all these things like the man that Neil Brown was. That's the kind of man that you want, as, at the helm of your program. But there was such a losing, we're just here to participate, have a good time. Again, and that's when he had that Freudian slip about the tailgating and the weather and all that jazz, is there was this mentality that infiltrated this program of it is just good enough to show up and play hard, no matter the result. And don't get me wrong, I said that, so I want to be consistent about Rich Rodriguez's teams. like, coming in is like, yes, we want to win every single time, but you can tell the difference as a Mountaineer fan whether a team's playing hard or not. This was emblematic, once again, this game, of West Virginia just being so freaking soft under Neil Brown. A Neil Brown coach team, now Chad Scott, this whole Neil Brown administration. Go back. I'm telling you, if you want a good, like, wake out of this daze as a mountain, this laissez-faire, spell that Neil Brown has this program under, or did now. Thank God that we can turn the page into the new, going back to the old Rich Rod era. Go watch 2004 West Virginia versus Maryland. There was such heavy hitting, physicality, intensity by West Virginia's defense, you will not recognize that this is the same program 20 years later. You won't. You won't. From the terrible, filling lanes, gaps, again, tackling, the intensity with which teams tackle and cover. It just always seems like, especially defensively, that West Virginia is reactive, not proactive. And when they do make a physical play, it's like shocking. And it's like, there was a point in time in this game, I think it was the fourth quarter, or there at the end, 3rd and 8, Ben Cutter comes after Seth Hennigan, and I think he had a towel or something on, and Ben Cutter just rips it off him, almost like a flag football, like kind of flag, the way he was holding this towel. And Hennigan throws the ball at the line of scrimmage and forces an incompletion. And he goes nuts. I don't know why. I don't know the context. I'm not out on the field. He goes absolutely freaking nuts. And I don't know if you saw this. I'd love to know your thoughts and leave your comments here on YouTube if you saw this play. He started just rabble-rousing, getting in Hennigan's face, getting in the offensive line, yelling at his teammates, freaking out. And everybody's just all uncomfortable and up in arms what are you doing? That is the way that if West Virginia had all 11 guys on its defense playing that kind of pissed off mentality for I don't care what reason, good or bad reason, at least you're going out there, you're going all out, you're going full speed. There's too much thinking. There's too much thinking going on by these players on the field, offensively and defensively, where they're getting lined up, what they're supposed to do. And I know this all comes back to coaching. And this is why Neil Brown was fired, and then probably most of the staff, if not all, is going to, clean house. That Rich Rodriguez is bringing his reckoning. He's doing it first or on the players, and you've seen some transfer portalers out already this evening as I'm recording this. But just the lack of physicality, the softness, the lack of intensity, and just everything was just a disease brought in by Neil Brown and his staff of just excuse making, and we're just going to go out there, we're going to look pretty in our uniforms, and we're going to play hard, and that's what I hope that they say at the end of the day. And because I'm such a good guy, so I'm such a family man, that they're going to keep me around. And he had Shane Lyons wrapped around his finger, so he got that away with that until finally enough became enough against Texas Tech. And I'm actually thankful now, on December 18th. I never want to see the old Gold and Blue lose. Truly, I don't. And I wish West Virginia, would have won that game. But I think that might have been just an absolute blessing in disguise. Because if you listen to the press conference by Ren Baker, I don't know which exactly one, but just man, it was really, really hard for him to pull that trigger. And it honestly didn't sound like until the end of the game came there against Texas Tech that he pulled the trigger, let him go, and they started on this coaching search to eventually come up with Rich Rodriguez as the new head coach. And boy, oh boy, does this mentality, this hard edge mentality, needed absolutely positively now. And I'm not going to make a big deal out of the whole T-shirts things, players wearing the Neil Breezy T-shirts prior to the game and the pregame warmups and all of that jazz. But that's perfect. That is a perfect example right there of like everybody on the players on the team loved Uncle Neil's cookouts, loved his boat, loved skiing or snow tubing at Wisp in the off season. Probably took it a whole lot easier. It was like weekend at Bernie's under head coach Neil Brown for 6 seasons. And because we as fans, we only have the access that we have through, social media clips, articles that, could the West Virginia media at large have been more critical at times, like some of the other fan podcasters and YouTubers out there are, like myself. And who knows whether that's, Mike Montoro just holding the press badges over these, media members' heads of what they can say and what they can't say. And I know it's fierce competition in the WVU media world. I totally understand that. So was he and others in a way, Shane Lyons, and for some respects, maybe not, Ren Baker, protecting, insulating Neil Brown from the criticism, because again, he's a family man. He's got to make his son and daughter's basketball games or see their practices and stuff like that. I don't mean to turn this personal, but it becomes borderline personal when it becomes to this extent. The worst 6-year stretch in, 3 generations, going back to the 70s, that Westford, pre the modern era of Don Nehlen, that it became this bad. And you just see this with now all these transfer portalers and happen like that, is they lowered the standard. They lowered the standard even from when, Dana Holgerson tried to, and I feel like did, stabilize this program from where, after Rich Rodriguez left for Michigan, 3 consecutive seasons, I think, under Bill Stewart, 9-4 record, not winning the Big East, losing to Syracuse the way West Virginia did, and then eventually UConn, and that's what I think was to his detriment. But Dana Holgerson took West Virginia into the Big 12 conference, took Geno Smith, Stedman Bailey, Tavon Austin to a whole new level, and then, eventually getting through the Skylar Howard era to Will Grier, taking them, to places where they were right there at the edge of the knife of winning the Big 12 conference and then moving on. But my, oh my, I feel like Neil Brown drove this program into a tree. And it just, over time, I just think that people were too comfortable. They were too comfortable getting paid what they were, in players and NIL dollars and what they had to do through their, off-season conditioning and practices and going through the motions. And I don't know, honest to goodness, what some of these assistant coaches were doing at practices. Like, are they that incompetent that, for a guy in Shadon Brown who takes a guy like Garnet Hollis Jr., who was projected last year's NFL draft as a day 3 pick, 5th round, according to Senior Bowl director Jim Nagy, and he's now so bad. I don't know. I don't want to pour on any much more than I already have in 40 minutes, but I'm just so tired, that we can finally close this book, close this era of Neil Brown football. And that was it. That game last night was it in a nutshell. Enough coaching mistakes, enough player mistakes, not enough, talent in places where you should have talent. That everything needs to be hauled over, recalibrated, ship as many people out as you need to, get your guys in there, and unfortunately you're going to have to start from the bottom and create a whole new culture of guys who want to buy into the West Virginia program, who will be compensated well enough in NIL dollars that they're going to give it their all. But you know what I mean? There's just not so many distractions because they have a head coach who eats, sleeps, breathes the highest standard of college football as there possibly is. So, I know it's taken me, or seems like it's quick, of my complete change of heart and things like this. But now I am just thankful. I feel like West Virginia is blessed that it has Rich Rodriguez in there as a coach and no one else, because he's going to tear it to shreds. It is going to be, I'm trying to, like Mount Vesuvius. Like, he is just going to destroy the trust the climb attitude that is within this program into something that is completely different. And he has the competence as a head coach to be able to go in there and do so, and I'm seeing just players now, left and right transfer portaling. So West Virginia is going to have to replace its entire starting offensive line next season, pretty much the entire defense. It's going to be, like I said, a crazy next month and even 6 months up as players are inserted in through the transfer portal. I don't know how many are going to come in and how many are going to go out, but man, do it, overhaul it. Like, there just needs to be a new West Virginia made. And there are some pieces, so I do hope that he keeps some guys, has some good conversations with some players who want to be here, want to stick around, want to establish this new era together. Whether they have 1 year's worth of eligibility or two, or they're coming in as an incoming freshman. But thank goodness that Neil Brown is out of here, and a lot of the players who have that kind of mentality, attitude, just like him. So that's what I can sum up. Am I too harsh? Am I too critical? Or is that how you feel too? You can't lose the coffee bowl, the freaking coffee bowl, to Memphis. 42-37 your final. Leave your comments here on YouTube. Would love to have them. If you like this video, like it so more fans around YouTube can watch it. Love to have you as subscribers to my channel. I'm so thankful reaching here end of the 2024 season, and I'm over 400 subscribers. I can't thank you enough, Mountaineer Nation. I know I'm a guy who, very small budget, doing these videos. Not with all the handy, fancy graphics and other video clips and stuff that I would love to make this like a full-time kind of gig that I could do some of that kind of like work that you see, on places like, Late Kick, Josh Pate and others, ESPN shows and stuff like that. But I thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a subscriber. We're going to talk more football. Want to sprinkle in more basketball here. So I'll tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. That sums up the 2024 season with West Virginia finishing 6-7, and I cannot believe where they were. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Let's go. Hail West Virginia and spot the ball.